Welcome to the Beyond Divorce Embracing Change podcast. My name is Michael Flores, and I will be your host while we explore the complex journey of divorce with empathy, insight, and practical knowledge. Whether you're contemplating separation, in a divorce, or looking for support post-divorce, our episodes provide expert guidance, stories, and strategies to help you through every step of the process. We are actual therapists, helping clients who sit on our couches every day through their difficulties of divorce. You are not alone. Join us as we delve in and find solutions that give you hope again. We're glad you're here.
This podcast is not intended to replace legal or personal help. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Well, welcome everyone, and good day to all of you. Today we're going to be doing a session on, are you seeking justice or resolution with your ex? That's really the question.
That is.
Yeah, it's a question. I mean, like literally, I think I've asked this question in session before. I actually have Jinohn here today to really, she's tasked with doing this with me. So she's going to take more of the, I don't know if I call it the moderator or the interviewer. I'm the interviewee, I guess.
Yeah, like you're the expert and I am the...
Oh, hold on.
I'm just gonna be here to learn from you.
Yeah, sure. If that becomes the case, they're going to probably get bored pretty quick. I hope you'll chime in.
Obviously, yes.
Hey, please do that. So thank you for that, Jinohn. So Jinohn's going to be taking over the interviewing role. She will be interviewing me mainly for this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. We really would appreciate if you would just take a moment to rate or review on whatever platform you're choosing to listen to. Those rates and reviews really do help, and we want to continue to do this with you guys. We actually learned that most podcasts end at about 10 episodes, like people just stop. And I'm not willing to stop, but if it's not getting to people, I mean, it probably will deflate me a little bit, and I'll be like, I don't know if people really want what we have to offer. So my hope is that they will rate and review, share, let people know that we exist.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. That's what my kids say on YouTube stuff all the time. Like and subscribe. So yes, please like and subscribe. We would just want to keep helping you. That's what we're here for. So love it. Thank you, Jinohn. Thanks for doing this.
Of course.
I appreciate that.
Of course.
So let's get into this. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's do, I think the phrase is brass tacks. Let's talk about just the definition of justice and resolution.
Yeah.
In the context of divorce.
Okay.
What does justice look like in a divorce?
Well, that's a great question, Jinohn. And I think when I've learned from the individuals I've had the pleasure of serving, justice to them really a lot of times is feeling like they got to tell their story, that it was heard.
Yeah.
I think that's step one of justice for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think step two for them is that something actually happened. There's an accountability that happens. I used to call it like a moral debt being paid. Typically, when someone wants justice, they're saying that there was an injustice, right? I mean, I think that's what that means.
Yeah.
And so they're wanting a debt of sorts to be paid. And what that looks like is someone called them out on it. Someone said, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. Or there's a consequence for the reason you did X.
Right.
Whatever that is. And so to me, that's what I assume, based on what I've learned, that most people are looking for.
Right.
But step one, I think, for people with justice is, they've heard my story.
Yeah.
So that's probably the way I would define it.
Wow. Yeah. And that just kind of made me think of some experiences that I've had where it wasn't necessarily anything that had to do with, let's say, the actual court process, but like you said, a moral debt. They wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
And once they felt heard, then it was just kind of like, okay, now I can get to a point where maybe we get to resolution. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's almost like once they feel heard, sometimes they're more willing to let go.
Right.
I think that, you said something once. What was that poison thing? Like you drink poison hoping the other person will?
Oh, yeah. Like unforgiveness, right?
Yeah, when people don't forgive, what is it like?
Yeah, it's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die from it.
Yeah, and I see justice more like people holding on to a rope that's like full of thorns, I guess. It's poking them.
Right.
But they're so like, I'm not going to let go of this rope, even though I know it could be hurting me to hold on to this resentment or whatever I may be feeling, until someone comes up and says, you know what? I see what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, do you think that, well, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that people that are seeking justice want people to agree with them? Or are they looking for just more of a validation?
From my experience, I think validation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, because I think, I don't know if there is necessarily a good correction to kind of what the injustice might be. But if you validate how I feel and I feel understood, then I can kind of, I would say let it go for lack of a better phrase, but then I can kind of let that resentment go. Yeah. And we can maybe move forward to something else.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking as you were talking through that, as I'm sitting here thinking, in my Christian faith, Jesus was crucified for what did he do? What did he do wrong that he deserved to die?
Yeah, he didn't do anything.
So was that just? Or was that an injustice?
I guess if you're thinking like
as a Christian believer, I think we would come from the perspective that was an injustice.
Injustice, right.
For other people who believe that was justice, was this man is claiming to be God,
mm-hmm.
or the Son of God, and he's a blasphemer. And so we need to protect the people from this blasphemer who's spewing all these lies
mm-hmm.
to people. In reality, they were afraid of him, but they killed him.
Right.
And so to them, that was justice. Justice was crucifying.
Mm-hmm.
But to those who believe in him, it was an injustice. So then the question comes down to, how do you really define justice? Because one person thinks it's injustice, other person thinks it's justice. And so then we have this back and forth of what is truly just. I think it's truly a philosophical question. I think justice is absolutely philosophical in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking through it with you, and I'm using my faith as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really amazing about, if you're a Christian believer and you say that was an injustice, what they did to Jesus, for what, their reasons. But as a result of what happened to Jesus, what do you get now?
You get justification.
Oh, see there?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people miss in this.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless whether you call it just or unjust, in the end, depending on how you respond to it, there is justification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how you reframe it.
That's part of what we're going to be talking about later.
Yeah, can we reframe this seeming injustice or unfairness or anything like that? Can we reframe it to where I still feel like I have some sense of satisfaction, I will say,
right,
in the end.
What does a reframe mean? Can you describe that for the listeners?
Good question.
Thank you.
So, thanks, interviewer.
Well, it's a great term. We use it all the time, but what does it mean?
Yeah. So reframing is essentially just changing the way that you look at something. So I could look at, I like to give this example to the kids that I talk to all the time. It's kind of wacky, but I go off the left field so then it can it can hit. So I tell them, I say, you know what? I say, you can think one way. If I came up to you and slapped you in your face, I was like, you can, it can be, oh my God, that was just terrible. And that was, why would you do that? That's unjust, right? To just come up and slap you in the face. But what if there was a spider on there? There's a spider on your face and I just came up and it was going to bite you and I just slapped you. We can reframe it. I saved your life.
Well, did I slap you or the spider?
Right. Or there you go. Did I slap you with a spider? Did I do something wrong to you or did I save your life?
Oh, and it depends on how they take it, I guess.
It depends on how you...
So they reframe it and say, you were trying to protect me by slapping the spider.
Right.
But I got hit.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I love it. So, this is such a
I know.
point.
Using violence is not great, but...
Well, we are challenging your thoughts on this on purpose to help you learn how to navigate this so that you can decide how you're going to get to a resolution.
Right.
Is justice a resolution? Or is justice and resolution truly something separate?
Right. Are they mutually exclusive? Can you have one and not have the other?
Not have the other, exactly.
Can you have both?
Yep.
We'll answer those questions later.
Well, I think some people seek resolution through justice, is what they call something to be just. Like that is resolution for them, is how it can be defined.
But are they the same thing?
Right.
So if we're kind of gonna stay in that vein, what does resolution look like?
Ooh.
How would you define that?
And here's what's hard when you're dealing with the divorce is sometimes both parents have a very different idea of what resolution should look like, right? And so they go to I call the judge the tiebreaker. You know, when parents typically agree, I've learned that most everyone lets them do their thing as long as it doesn't impede the safety of the child.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I had a scenario where a kid was grounded from their cell phone. One parent said a week, the other parent said a month. The parent said a month, that's too long. The parent said a week, he says that's not long enough. So here we are not figuring out this timeline of event. By the end of the deal, they agreed to do a month. Now, I'll be honest with you, I must have done a great job not giving my opinion on that situation because I did truly feel like a month is a pretty long time not to have a device. I mean, that's a long time. That's a whole month, like you can imagine.
Yeah.
However, as a result of their agreement, it was fulfilled. Kiddo comes into the session. Parent says, hey, we had a conversation. We agreed on a month.
Yeah.
Kid looked at me like, what are you going to do about this? And I said, your parents agreed. That has more authority than me.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I said, why? Well, what do you think about this? He literally looked at me and said, these parents don't ever agree on anything. Ever. But I'm really glad that they did this time.
Right.
It's almost like he appreciated the agreement.
Yeah.
However, I hate that I'm losing my
in spite of the...
Yeah. So we got justice, maybe a little sprinkle of resolution.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is like a resolution starts with how it's defined. And the way that you do that, I think, with a parent or in a divorce case, is you have to ask the other person what they want things to look like. You can't offer anything to be helpful if you don't know what the other side really wants. If you're only offering what you want, that's not resolution.
Right.
It's almost like I know what I want, but I really don't know what you want. Or maybe I think I know what you want. And that goes back to flirt with the assumption, don't marry it. Dr. Bruce Gita, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to flirting with that assumption and saying, I'm assuming you want this, but I haven't really asked you. So what do you really want in all this?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you hear it, you might realize that you actually align with some of those things. That's resolution oriented. So to me, resolution is a place where, let me say this. When parents come in and say they don't co-parent, you know what I've learned they're saying?
Mm-hmm.
They're saying is they don't agree with me.
Right.
What I've learned to do when people say they don't co-parent, I like to look at them and say something like, what I really feel like you're saying is, we don't know what to do when we don't agree. Co-parenting to me is not working through an agreement. It's working through a disagreement.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Co-parenting is working through disagreements. Co-parenting is not working through agreements. That's parental alignment. So to me, building a resolution with someone requires a conversation of saying, what would you like this to look like? And seeing where you align with each other. And when you don't align with each other, you can say, I agree with these. So I think the best thing people do is learning to start with what they agree with, not what they disagree with.
Yeah, because where do you go from there?
100%. I think the conversation, if I'm having a conversation with someone who we don't agree on, I'll give you an example. My brother, and I'm not going to get into politics. I know that's probably a sore subject for some people right now. For other people, they're like super excited. It's just we're split in our society. The point I'm going to make, though, is like, if I'm talking to my brother, okay, and he is diehard one way on this deal, rather than sitting here and making a point or arguing with him, what I'll typically say to him when I first talk to him is I'll tell him where I agree with him. I'll say, you know what, I agree, there needs to be a change in the X, or I agree there needs to be, or I agree with you that that would make more sense for us as a society. And once I do that, it deflates him.
Right. Lowers the defenses, right?
Lowers the defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to say, here's the part where I'm not on the same page with you. I do that second. I think parents, when they're trying to resolve things, I think they do it backwards.
Yeah.
I think they just tell them when they don't agree. They just go right into it. Like, no, that's dumb. We're not going to, whatever. I'm like, hold on. But where do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't know where you agree until you ask them what they want or what they want it to look like. Be willing to be curious, So resolution, in my opinion, starts with curiosity.
Curiosity. Yeah.
I think. You can chime in and say, Michael, you're way off.
Michael, you are way spot on.
I invited you to say that. Okay, why am I off?
I said spot on, though.
Oh, spot on.
I didn't hear it.
I didn't even hear it. You're so spot on. No. Well, anyway, I think that resolution starts with curiosity because a resolution Well, let's talk about that word for a second. What does it mean to resolve? Not solve, resolve.
Solve again.
So it means it's solvable.
Solvable.
If you can solve it again.
Mm-hmm.
It means a solution exists and we can do it. We can resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
Resolve it.
Resolve it.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
No.
I never thought about that word like that.
Yeah, I don't think about words very often.
Again, which means it's solvable. So maybe the first part, let's get into the next part of this, which is making a mindset shift. You have to assume that all problems are solvable.
Yes.
You have to. You have to assume that every problem can be solved. Once you assume that, then it just becomes your creativity and your imagination on how to do it. I mean, I'll give you a funny example. We use someone in our society, Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
This dude's doing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's creating the Jetsons, isn't he? I mean, we're about to have these little pods come out. You think these pods are going to do a podcast?
I hope not. Please don't take my job.
these machines. No, but I'm like, he's like creating Terminator, in a sense. He's creating these machines that can do all this cool stuff. No, but Elon likes being told it's not solvable. It can't be done. It can't. He loves it. He's like, oh my gosh, now I have another thing I can solve. Like he loves problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, he really believes everything can be solved. That's his mindset. Everything can be solved.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, do you want to? Do you suppose that people that want justice want to solve the problem? Or they just want something, or is it more personal to them?
I was going to say, maybe they want to solve their problem, but not the problem.
Okay, Jinohn, since you said that, describe what that means. They want to solve their problem, not necessarily the problem.
Right.
What does that mean?
So I'm going to flesh this out as I'm talking.
That's fine. Do it.
I think that, I think justice is very personal.
Yes.
When you're seeking justice, I'm seeking something very personal to me.
Right.
And so it is my problem that I need it to be solved, but it may not be the problem, and the problem just that the family is having, we'll say. So in divorce situations, it's just like, I don't even have a good example, but let's do this.
Okay.
We'll do custody. That's probably the easiest and usually the most common thing.
Let's do it. Well, let's define what custody really is. It's not possession access. Custody is the rights to your kid.
The rights to your kids and all that stuff. But let's talk about possession access. Let's do that.
There you go. Let's say what it is.
Possession access, the problem is I'm not seeing my kid enough.
Yep.
That's the problem. And so I need justice. I need to see my kid more. Right?
Yeah.
That's what we hear.
We hear it.
That's what we hear. But what if there is a bigger umbrella of a problem that is not necessarily has nothing to do with that person seeing their kid more, but it really has something to do with, relationship or quality of, the time that they have with their kid, that kind of stuff. So that's not the problem. The problem is not, I'm not seeing my kid enough. The actual problem might be, I'm not having quality time with my kid.
Right. There's a bigger deal there. Yeah.
Like, I have an issue. My kid doesn't like me. And so I just need more time.
Well, the issue I've had in that same scenario where a parent's not getting enough time with their kid, they'll use comparison. They'll say things like, even a criminal gets more time with their kid, and I'm not a criminal. I haven't broken the law, right? I haven't committed a crime, but my ex feels I drink too much, or my ex feels I do X, and so they don't want me around the kid, and they're filing all these TROs or protective orders to keep me from my child, and they're treating me like I'm a criminal. But even criminals get more time with their kids than I do. Have you heard of anything like that before? And so they believe there's an injustice.
Yeah.
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 So what I've learned to do in that situation is go, this almost seems, and I hate to use that word, the taboo word, that seems unfair. They'll agree with that. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I say, so how do we solve this? I'll kick it back to them. How do we solve it? Well, the court needs to this, the court. And I just look at them and say, well, unfortunately, I'm a therapist. I'm not the court. You'll have to take it up with the court.
Right.
Like, to me, I've learned therapeutically, like when a person wants justice, I'm probably not their person.
Yeah.
Once they define it to me that it's that, I'm probably not going to help you in therapy. You're going to feel like I did a bad job because you were wanting something I can't offer you. Because what you want done is there's a moral debt owed to you, and I can't make them pay it.
Right.
Makes sense? So you want that's probably where you go to the court for. However, the mind shift has to change into, if you're willing to look at yourself and say, I wonder what I'm creating, if anything, that is putting the other person in a position to do what they think is just.
Right.
Because the injustice you think you have is justice to them.
Right.
I'm dead serious. Like, if people could do that, is go, it is so unjust that this is happening. Well, they think it is justice. The other side does. Go back to Jesus. When they crucified him, they thought they were doing what was just.
Yeah.
And it was an injustice. We call it an injustice, those believers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they call it justice. So which is it?
Yeah.
So when you think you have an injustice, they think they have justice. Just know that. And if you flip it and you say, this is just, they're going to say it's unjust.
Right.
They're just going to reverse you. So Uno reverse card, boom, there you go. So to me, I don't know if justice is truly resolution. I think when I'm,
Is it like winners and losers? Like, there's always going to be a winner and loser when you talk about justice, right?
And not to bang the court, okay? Not to hit the court, but I'm going to say something about the court. I don't think the court does lend itself to winning and losing. And probably not on purpose. It's just built that way. Our court system is built on winners and losers.
Yeah.
So people go land to win. And I will tell you right now, I truly believe, and I think the courts would back this up. Like, if I could ever get a judge to talk on this, I think a judge would say, if you're going to court to solve a problem, everyone's probably losing. There's only one reason you're going to court. It's because y'all can't figure it out. So one of y'all is going to walk out with a loss. And in actuality, you're probably going to both walk out with a loss.
And the biggest loss is going to be the kids.
Well, say it. Go ahead. Tell them. The biggest loss? Tell them.
Yeah, the kids. I mean, because you think about it, in court cases, most of the time, if a parent is trying to seek justice or both parents are trying to seek justice, it prolongs it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just, go back to court. No, I don't like that. Going to go back to court. I don't like that. And the effect that it has on kids when you have a prolonged court case, it can be detrimental.
You know, I think what I hope for people is when they go to court, they don't go to court for justice. They go to court for movement. I would use the court as a way to help get things to move along. Because sometimes one of the things a parent might do is stall, pause, ignore, avoid. And that makes things not movable. So it's kind of like this, when your car goes like dead and it dies, the way you move your car, do you know what gear you have to put it in?
I mean, no.
So your car died on the side of the road.
Oh, neutral, right?
There you go.
Okay.
Neutral. Right? You go neutral. You don't put it in overdrive.
Right?
But that's how people use the court systems. They use it as overdrive. And I think the attorneys do that too. But in reality, what I've learned is they're doing that to create movement. Does it make sense? It's to get things to move. If you use the system not for justice, because remember, justice is one of those philosophical words in my opinion.
Right.
What some may think is just, others think there's unjust. I believe that if you use the court to create movement, not justice, you'll get further along. And then, hopefully, what's built in there is an arrangement on how to get to resolution.
Right.
Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes any sense at all. There.
Yes, it does.
It does to you. Hopefully to our
listeners. Does it make sense to you out there?
Well,
Go ahead and comment.
Well, yes. We want you to comment. We want you to ask us questions. You can say, Michael, what the heck were you talking about on there? That does not bother me. Ask me. I would love to get to talk more. So, did you know we're doing that now? We're answering questions?
Oh, no, I did not.
Yeah, so we got to answer a question on one of the episodes with Armando.
Oh, nice.
So we're going to start answering.
Oh, no, I did know that. Okay, yes.
Should I?
I knew it.
Okay. So for those of you listening and you want to ask us questions, look in the link. Typically, there's a place there for you to ask your questions. If you have them, we will try our best to answer all of them if we can.
Love to.
But we will answer questions. So please ask your questions. We want to answer them. It was really fun because we don't know the questions. And so what we do is we get the question and then we turn it over and look at it and go, oh, there it is. It's so funny because we're like, oh, that's a good, and we're kind of having to think through it on the spot. So it's actually, it's really cool.
That's fun.
It is fun and challenging.
That is really fun.
But I like the challenge. So
okay.
So anyway, getting back to this, I believe that justice and resolution can coincide depending on how they're used.
Okay.
I don't think they're the same. I think they are different. I don't think you can, let me say it this way. I think you can get justice and no resolution.
Yes.
But I think when you get resolutions, you always have justice.
Yeah, or there's like a vein of justice
Built
within
into it.
Yeah.
That's right. It's like a layer, isn't it? So I think when you have resolutions, there's a layer of justice. I do believe that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's you can call it just, but there's a layer of justice in resolutions. But there's not always a resolution in justice, in my opinion. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a question. But that's how I'm seeing it right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, one thing that I was kind of thinking about is, can both parents get justice? Can they both get justice?
Can they?
Without the resolution, though. I think resolution is very collaborative. So if you are, kind of like what you said, if you are gunning for, and I'll say gunning in very...
if your MO is...
on purpose. If you're gunning for a resolution...
Yeah.
I think that they can both get a form of justice, like you said, because it's collaborative. And...
True.
You're... I don't know, compromise, those kind of things. But
I don't know if I believe in compromise. I believe more in validation.
Okay, tell me more.
I think a true layer of compromising to people, like when I hear that, I get the feeling of I got to give something up. And I don't think people who are seeking out justice are wanting to give anything up. They're wanting something to happen. But if you said, hey, have people really understood where you're coming from? Does anyone get it? Does anyone sense what you're feeling? If they're like, no, they don't. As soon as they do feel that, they start to feel they're getting justice, I think.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
So I will go back and say that, to me, not compromise, but basically that resolution has to have some level of validation built into it.
Okay.
So what I would task the listeners to do is, if you want there to be a resolution and you want justice to be a part of it, you're going to have to validate the other person's side that you don't agree with. At some layer or level, you're going to have to at least validate their point of view. You may not agree with them. Validation doesn't mean agreement.
I was just about to say that.
Well, say it.
Validation does not mean agreement.
It doesn't. Let's
does
be
not.
clear on that.
Yeah. I tell that to parents all the time when they're talking to their kids. I'm like, even if they say something that you don't believe has happened, validate their feelings.
Right.
Anyways.
So remember the kid that lost her phone?
Yes.
Yeah, for all that long.
Yeah.
Spent your parent like a month. Looking at that kid and going, man, it's going to be really hard to not have your phone for a month, huh? That's validation.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I'm going to go, well, since that's the case, let me go ahead and just make it 2 weeks.
Yeah.
No. I might just say that's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard to miss out your friend's birthday party because, your grades weren't good.
Right.
For whatever it might be. You're just saying, I can see this is hard. I can see you don't like this. I can see you don't trust me.
Yeah.
I can see that you don't. It's okay to say that to them. That's validation. I can see that.
Yeah.
I get it. And you know what? With what you're saying you've been through, I may not agree that that's actually been the narrative or the case. But man, if it's the way you described it and that's really what you feel, I would probably struggle trusting me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's literally what validation is. That is empathy built in with validating.
Yeah.
I see you. I hear you. I'm going to empathize with that, but I don't have to agree with it.
Yeah.
I think people struggle with that. But to me, I think that if you want justice, you have to be willing to do that, in my opinion. Because most people, in most cases, I think once that happens, they're now more seeking resolution at that point. Mm-hmm. I do. I think that's where forgiveness could start. And I think that starts with, what was that word we used? Grace.
Grace.
You know what I love that you did for me? You said something to me, and I didn't really steal the word. I knew the word, but I didn't ever think about it. You said something about grace. Did you make a video or something, a short, where you talked about give yourself grace?
Yes. Don't ask me to quote it because I have no idea what I said.
I'm not going to ask you to quote it. We say a lot of stuff. I'm not going to ask you to quote it. But it rung with me because we have to, as counselors, give ourselves grace too. We're not perfect.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We do our best.
Yeah.
We have to give ourselves grace as spouses. We have to give ourselves grace as parents. And that was one of the things you said was, parents, give yourselves grace.
Yeah.
And the truth is like, you have to be willing to, if you want grace, you have to give it away.
You gotta be, willing to give it.
It's almost as if I want people to hear here, like if you want justice and resolution, why don't you just give it away? Life has this weird thing that whatever you give away, it always finds its way back. It just seems to always circulate. What do we used to call it? Karma. right? It goes around, comes around. Get what you reap what you sow. I mean, that's biblical.
Mm-hmm. It is.
But the truth is, if you want something, give it away. If you want justice, be just. Give it away.
Yeah.
Let other people have theirs. Remember, what you think is just may be an injustice to someone else.
Yeah.
Just know that. Just keep that in mind. That's the mindset piece.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, keep going. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me, or did you have questions about anything? Ask as a parent if you want to. Pretend you were a listener and ask me if that will help you.
Well, I did have a question because you are a therapist who has a lot of finesse with parents.
Ugh.
When I watch you, you just
thank you.
Finesse with them.
I don't know if I'd call myself finesse or just sometimes I come off different than finesse, but thank you.
So as a parent working with divorced parents, or as a therapist, working with divorced parents, how do you recognize, and it might be easy to, but how do you recognize a parent that's seeking justice versus resolution? And then how do you work with them?
Oh man, those are two really good questions. So you said work with them was one?
Yeah.
And then how do I recognize?
How do you recognize it? And only give tidbits because...
No, I know. At this point in my career, I don't even know if I know how I recognize. But I will say the things that lead me into being curious is when they come in wanting to tell the story of what happened to them over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's repetitive.
Yeah.
Like it's when the person comes in and they're always the victim in the story, and everything happened to them. Nothing's happened for them. To me, that's a person who's most likely seeking justice, is what I've learned. Okay. So that's what I've recognized.
And that's that moral debt that they're...
Well, that's what they're describing, is moral debt owed.
Right.
And so to me, I'm like, okay, that's a sign, right? That's like to me, it's almost like, remember, flirt with the assumptions, don't marry them.
Right.
So it just makes me more curious as a therapist, and maybe that's where the finesse comes. But more, it's the method of the magic, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the ways that I recognize. There's others, but that would probably be one of the main.
I'm gonna interject because I thought of something. Culturally, have you seen any differences in people that are seeking justice?
Well, the issue that I've had with culture is typically the kids are raised as Americans, and their parents are more of the cultural background. I have to be real cognizant of that. And one of the ways that I feel like I can be just, the law is the law. I let that be black and white. But I'll give an example of one. Discipline comes up a lot with culture. Mm-hmm. So how parents discipline their kids. And one of the things I have to do is at least acknowledge that there's a cultural component. And so what I do is I ask, I say, how does discipline typically work in your culture? Or what does that typically look like? Mm-hmm. And let them tell you, let them describe it, and just be interested in it. And then say, oh, I see that. And just like, I know our laws here don't coincide with the cultural component. So how are we going to make that work? If the law says you have to do it this way, but culturally you do it this way, it seems that there's going to always be this tug of war between those two areas. How do we do this? Mm-hmm. And I've learned that works better. So going back to cultural, I think as therapists, we first have to acknowledge that there's a cultural difference. Yeah. And be interested in what that is. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what I do.
All right.
Yeah. So how do I work with them?
How do you work with them?
Well, that's one way to work with them.
Yeah.
One way that I work with that, people who are seeking justice, is I do exactly what I train them to do, which is to validate it.
Yeah.
And I'm really clear on validating, not agreeing. I'm really good at that. It's hard because sometimes people will push me to agree with them. They need me to align with their side. People that want justice are real good on that too. Mm-hmm. And that's another way I know, is they're really pushy on me aligning with them. And what I like to do is trying to describe, I got to quote you now, I like going back to the Three Little Pigs story. Mm-hmm. And and to the three pigs, they got justice because he's in jail, right? The wolf.
Right.
But to the wolf, it's an injustice because he had a sneeze.
Yeah. He was just trying to bake a cake for his grandma.
Oh, poor guy. He wanted to know if we could borrow a cup of sugar. Matter of fact, he asked from Jill if he could borrow a cup of sugar. Did you see that at the end?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So crazy.
Poor guy.
Poor guy, right? Yeah. Such an injustice. So no, it's such a justice, right? That's my point. And so I think that story is what resonates with me with people. It's going, This is what we have. I told someone the other day, I said, when there's been a crime committed, there's 3 people that have to get interviewed. If you can interview all 3, the victim, right, the suspect, and the witness.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3. And they typically can't do anything with that case until those 3 people are discussed, to discuss with them what happened. And so that's how it works. And I think that's the right way. To me, that is so much justice. Do you think it's just? I'll give you an example. I gave a kid. You get in a fight at school with a kid, okay, and you'll go to the principal's office, and the principal interviews the other kid first. After that interview, they call you in and say, you're suspended.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is that fair? Well, I say fair, but is it just?
Is it just?
Maybe justice and fairness go together? Because Armando says fairness doesn't exist. So then that would say if fairness and justice are aligned. Does
justice even exist?
That's why it's so philosophical.
Is it like it negates each other? Like I feel there's justice and there's an injustice, but does it just negate each other and doesn't even exist?
Wow.
I don't know. Philosophical. We got deep.
I like the questions and I hate them. Man, they make my brain go. So that's good. What other questions did you have, Jinohn?
I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you
talk
a lot on this deal and say that, and thank you for including some of the things that you thought too. I appreciate that. For those of you listening, we just want to say thank you. If you found this helpful, please rate, review. We keep saying that. I know. I'll be honest with you. I always laugh when I watch the YouTube videos of my kids and they say that. But now I'm sitting here saying it because I'm like, now I understand why you have to say that. Please rate and review. Please subscribe to the podcast. Share this with your friends. If you love it, share it with others. If you hate it, tell me. There is a comment section. Or there's an email. There's a way you can let me know. I can only get better if I know, right? You got to tell me, right? I will take feedback. So in those of you that want to ask questions, please look in our links below. Feel free to ask questions. We are going to try our best to answer those as much as we can. Thank you for being here. We love you guys. Keep moving forward.